2001, I made my first trip to Australia. I went there at the invitation of Brother Rolly McDowell, who was the preacher in Bundaberg at that time, and the invitation of the good brethren of the Bundaberg Church of Christ in Bundaberg, Queensland, Australia. And my hope at that time was to immigrate to Australia with my family and to work with the congregation in Bundaberg. But by late 2003, it became apparent that I would not be given clearance to immigrate there, which was a very painful realization for me, as I had truly grown to know and to really love and appreciate the brethren in that place. And I desperately wanted to go, but it just wasn't going to happen. Just to show you that I was there years ago, and just to prove that I wasn't always gray-haired, that was me back in 2003, my second trip to Australia. And that the man that's standing there with me is Brother Ray Ward, and the young one that he's holding is Alicia Hanson. My mind went blank there for a moment. Alicia Hanson. We'll have more to say about both of these people in just a little while. In 2004 and in 2007, I made 2 preaching trips to India with my dad, Jack Maddox. Almost as long as I can remember, I've had a desire to take the Word of God to other places. You know, in Matthew 28, Jesus gave the Great Commission to his apostles to take the gospel into all the world. And in order to fulfill that command, we don't have to go to different countries, but I wanted to. And so I found opportunities to do that. And I just mentioned I took those 2 trips to India with my dad, and then I decided to take a break from those travels, and I was able to be home with my growing family. But then in 2015, as you'll remember, I felt it time to get back out there, as the children were now old enough to be a huge help to Michelle, and while I was away. And so I began to start to think about where my help would be needed most. I'd already been to China several times, 3 times. In 1997, in 2000, and then again in 2001. I spent about 3 months in total in that great country, and predominantly in the cities of Shanghai and then Dalian. And I loved it there. And the need is great there. Africa, Europe, Asia, Southeast Asia, South America, where would I go? The fact is, there's a tremendous need for evangelism all over the world, including right here in Canada, here in North America. But it soon became apparent to me, after giving it considerable thought, where I should go. I knew of men that were going to all the places that I've mentioned, but I was not aware of anyone going to Australia. At that time, and rather coincidentally, I had a call from my good friend and brother Ken Craig, who some of you have met. He's been here a few times. And he mentioned how he would love to go to Australia and present his big picture of the Bible lesson to the brethren there, and wondered if I knew anyone, if I had any contacts there, so that he might find an invitation to go. And I told him, well, it just so happens that I know some folks there, and I contacted my good friend Rick Hansen, who's a member at Bundaberg, and Rick talked to the men there, and it was agreed that they would really love for Ken to come, and for me to come as well. And I told Ken that was one of the requirements. If he goes, I'm going too. So we made the plan to go. And Ken presented his excellent material there, and then this past year went back and presented it in Melbourne as well, for which I'm really glad that he was able to do that. While Ken and I were together, I was there for 2 weeks and he was there for a week. We also were able to go up and spend a little bit of time Gladstone and in Rockhampton and get to know a few of the brethren up there. Not nearly enough time, but it was enough to see and know of the need that was there as well. While I was in Australia in 2015, many of the brethren encouraged me to come again, to return, and to do more teaching. In the past, faithful men, faithful brothers made evangelistic trips to Australia. Bill and Sewell Hall, Roy and Leslie Disselkamp, Jim Sasser, Jim Everett, Robert Harkrider, Harold Comer, Robert Turner. All of these faithful brothers made trips to Australia, and some even stayed a year or two. I think Roy Disselkamp was there a couple of years. Bill Hall was there a few years, and I believe his daughter Kenita was born there while they were there. Bob and Arlene Harkrider were there for a year. And works around Australia were strengthened when they were there. We're talking back in the 60s and 70s. Good men were fortified in the faith while they were there. Bill Hall and Rolly McDowell put out a paper for a year that's excellent. I have a copy of it, a monthly periodical, and it did tremendous good. But these men couldn't stay and eventually came home, and over the years congregations dwindled in size, and some disbanded altogether. And the good men who were preaching and teaching grew older, and some have passed from this life. Rolly McDowell comes to mind. Some of the young people fell away, and I knew where I should go. And so the plan then was to return and help when possible. I was in and am in contact with the brethren there regularly. I talk to Rick Hansen all the time. And I contacted them last summer in inquiring about a good time to return. And they suggested this past January. You know, in Australia, January is summer. The kids get out in December for their summer break, and then and are out for most of December and January. Then they go back to school. They suggested late January. That's when the kids' summer vacations are over. And it's, you know, a lot of people travel during that time, so most people are back home. So that would be the best time, the most conducive time for me to come. So I said that I would do my best to be there, contingent on whether or not I would be able to raise the support to come. And I'm very glad to say that the congregation in Peterborough, the congregation in Hamilton, the congregation in Wisconsin, where I mentioned Jim Sasser as one of the men that years ago went to Australia. And you might remember in your prayers, Jim, he's quite ill right now. He's 90 and has had some fairly serious health problems. His son, Whit, who preaches in Wisconsin, the congregation where he labors, helped me as well. Steve helped some, and others privately donated some money, and I was able to raise enough to go. And of course, then Jack, one day Michelle and I were talking, and she said, Jack really wants to go with you. And I thought, well, that'd be great. And I told Jack, yeah, you're welcome to come, but you got to raise your own money. And so Jack went to work and raised his own money, and he paid his own way. And I was really glad that he could do that. And I through Rick, because Ray doesn't use the internet at all. So I contacted Rick, and I said for him to have Ray call me. And Ray called me, and I said, Ray, he asked me what I would like to do on this trip. Is there anything special that I'd like to do? And I said, what I would really like to do, besides being in Bundaberg, is to get out and visit some of the other congregations and get to know more brethren there. Because I'd only been to a couple of congregations in Queensland. I only knew a few brethren. Mostly I knew the brethren in Bundaberg, and he thought that was a good idea. And I asked him, could you make the arrangements? Because I don't know them. He said he'd be glad to do that, and he did that. And he did a tremendous amount of groundwork. And by the time I got there, he'd arranged for me to speak for 9 congregations, and it ended up I actually was able to speak for 10. from Brisbane in the south of Queensland, all the way up to Rockhampton, 616 kilometers north of there, and all in between. We were able to visit different congregations, which I'll talk about in just a few moments. But let me back up a bit. Again, Jack was interested. I was glad for him to go. This would be his first time out of North America. It's good for a young guy to get out, young girls too, to get out and see the world when you can. And of course, Jack going meant that all my other children and my wife were a little jealous, understandably. But you'll get your turn if you raise the money. So we ordered our tickets. Now I've got to figure out how to do this. This is actually a video. I'll just let you. I'll keep talking for a minute. This was our first flight. Our first flight was from Toronto directly to Taipei, Taiwan. And so what that meant was, as you'll see here now, we left Toronto. We went due north. We just went straight up. And we went up through Ontario, and then we went right up through James Bay, Hudson Bay, as you'll see here, and across, I guess that's Nunavut, and through the islands of that, and then right north over Alaska. So we're out in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, and then we crossed over into Russia, which I've done before. That's okay. And that's not the scary part. The scary part's coming. That's the nothing part. We crossed through Russia, then here we are going across China, and down across by Japan there, and here we come up on North Korea. That was the scary part to me. So we go across North Korea and then down in Taipei, 16 hours. That was a long flight. And then we had an 18-and-a-half-hour layover in, I don't know if I can turn this off. Yeah, good. An 18-and-a-half-hour layover in Taipei, which if I'd been by my own would have been, but with Jack it was fun. We found out that they had a free half-day tour. The Taiwan Tourist Board gives a free half-day bus tour, so we took that. We met a young fella who actually is Vietnamese by nationality, but his parents immigrated to Canada. He was born here. He lived 15 minutes from us. And so we spent the whole day with him. He was on his way to Vietnam for a 2-month hike across the country, backpacking. And we had just a tremendous day together. But after that lovely 5 in the morning till 11:30 at night layover, then we had our short 8-hour flight, 8.5-hour flight from Taipei directly into Brisbane. And when we got to Brisbane, no problem with customs, which is always a bit of a worry because they're so strict. They didn't lose my bags this year like they did last time, which was really nice. And when we got there was Ray and Cheryl waiting for us. Ray and Cheryl are the parents of Cheryl Lee, who you see here. Cheryl Lee is Rick Hansen's wife, and also a very, very dear friend of mine. And I could write a book. When it talks about the Lord, John talks about the Lord and says if all the things that he said and did were written down, the world couldn't contain the books. And I understand that. We were there for a month and a half. I've got 7 pages here that I've typed out. And it's just a brief synopsis of all the things that we saw and did and said. I could go on for hours. I could write a book about it. But I'm not going to do that to you. But I could write a book of all the amazing things we did, the things we saw. But I'm just going to share with you the highlights. We saw countless fruit bats. I love those things. They're enormous, and they're just fruit eaters. Bundaberg, where there's a swamp, Baldwin Swamp, and several times Jack and I would walk through there, and the fruit bats fill the trees there, and we saw so many kangaroos. And you guess what Jack was catching all the time? Lizards, bearded dragons, water dragons, skinks, you name it. If it was scaly and trying to get away, Jack was catching it. Look at these slides got shrunk, but look at he's got that. That was a bearded dragon he caught one day. Australia Day, we're down at Bargara, and he caught that one as we were having a picnic there. Kangaroos, all over the place. Lorikeets, parrots, just beautiful things. Look, it's on my head. They were everywhere. I saw my first koala in the wild. What a thrill that was. And my first wild emus. That was just amazing. I saw things that people that live in Australia have never seen. My first wild wallabies. And again, Jack caught countless lizards. I got a little irritated at him sometimes. Stop catching them. Let them be. But, it's what he loves. We swam in the Coral Sea. We walked, stayed out of this water. Estuary crocodiles, yeah, okay. Let's not swim there. But, we swam in the Coral Sea. We swam one day. The waves were so high. It was really fun, but they're relentless. It would be nice if the waves would just take a break once in a while, but wham, wham. And they're so high that when you're up in that wave, it's like you're looking down a mile down. And it was beautiful. We walked the beautiful beaches of the Sunshine Coast up north of Brisbane, and Zilsey up near Rockhampton, the Gold Coast south of Brisbane. We were able to visit the Australia Zoo that was made famous by Steve Irwin. You remember Crocodile Hunter? Beautiful place. We were able to go to Undersea World one day and just marveled at the wonder of God's creation over and over again. We visited a crocodile farm one day near Zilsey. We were able to go into the Capricorn Caves up near Rockhampton. One evening, we attended a show that Rain would have loved because it was full of horses. It was the Australian Outback Spectacular. Made me a little stuffed up, but it was a great show. And it was a wonderful night. All these attractions that we visited were so much fun, and brethren there who have remained anonymous, and to show their gratitude for what we were doing while we were there, they paid for this. Extremely kind of them. We were an encouragement to them, but I think even more so, it was just such an encouragement to us to be with the brethren there. But I'm going to break the trip down into 5 sections. The first being the week we spent in Bundaberg. One more of these wonderful creatures. I'm going to tell you a bit more about. This is called a water dragon. We stayed with Rick and Shirley and Blake and Alicia Hansen. And as I said, Rick has been my good friend for 16 years now. He's one of my best mates, and I love him and his family dearly. I was in Australia in 2003. Remember I showed you that baby picture? That was Alicia. She was born 20 minutes before my birthday. I told her mother, couldn't you just hold it? She was born on the 19th of September. My birthday is the 20th. I was there when she was born. And so I've known her and her brother their whole lives, and they mean the world to me. But we were their guests, and they took such good care of us. And this is the building of the congregation in Bundaberg, where the brethren meet there. And I spoke. We got there on Friday. I spoke Sunday for them. Then I spoke again Wednesday, and then that Friday through Sunday, we had what they call a mission. What we call gospel meetings, they call it a mission. And so I preached that mission for them from Friday through Sunday. Whenever I'm with the dear brethren in Bundaberg, it's just like being back home. Even though I've not really spent that much time there, I've grown so close to the brethren there. And it's just a wonderful thing to be there. This is Ron, I got to remember his name, Ron Graham and his wife. Ron is the preacher there. His health is not great at the moment, so I think he comes in 3 Sundays a month, and then the men there fill in the times he can't be there. But Ron and his dear wife have been with the church there for a number of years now. Ron followed Rolly McDowell after he was stricken with dementia, and has been doing a great job there. He's got a wonderful website called simplybible.com. And that website and billboards that advertise that website have generated some good interest in the area, and some have come because of that. The mission went great, was well attended. Visitors came, for which I was very thankful. And during that first week, we were also able to travel and visit two very dear friends who used to be members of this congregation, Joan and Evert Clausen, who now live 2 hours west in a city called Gainda. And this is Evert standing there with the blue shirt, and his wife is in the white shirt right near him. Joan and Evert are very, very dear to me. In the past have shown me considerable kindness and continue to do so. And it was wonderful to be able to go out and take that drive and to visit with them and to visit them in their home. And amazingly enough, they came for the mission, the gospel meeting. And then they came the next week to Maryborough, where I was speaking. And the last week that I was able to be in Bundaberg and speak on Sunday, they were there again, which highlights the affection they have for me, which I'm thankful for, and their desire to be with God's people, which is very difficult for them. They live in Gainda, and they are the church in Gainda. It's just those two. So it was really good to be with them, and I was really glad, as I was the entire time I was there, that they were able to get to meet Jack and get to know him as well. The next part of the trip, the second section, began on a Tuesday morning, no, a Monday morning, right after the mission was over. Ray and Cheryl as I mentioned, are just amazing people, Ray and Cheryl Ward. Ray had made all the plans for me, set up all the appointments for me. And then Ray got his big white Toyota truck all ready to go, loaded up his caravan, which is what we call a trailer. And he and Cheryl spent the entire month that we were on the road taking us everywhere. Not many people are willing to go a few miles sometimes to help somebody. They drove literally thousands of kilometers all over, back and forth, up and down the coast of Queensland, hauling us around. And so as we left Bundaberg, the first place that we went to was Maryborough. Now, after Maryborough, and I'll get to that in a few moments, we'd go on to Gympie and then to Toowoomba, and then finally to the Sunshine Coast, which would be our base for the final week of the 2 weeks that we would now be away from Bundaberg. And when we were in Brisbane, we'd work with the brethren in Morayfield and in Rochdale, which is a suburb of Brisbane. But brethren Ray and Cheryl Ward, again, they spent 4 weeks of our 6 weeks in Australia as our nearly constant companions. And they were amazing. They loaded up their Toyota, they got the caravan packed and stuffed with food and whatnot, and they took us everywhere that Ray had arranged for me to speak. Because it was summer, and I think one of the hottest they've had in years, the temperatures range from 35 to 43 most of the time we were there, which for some of you is kind of like normal for back home, but for me it was blazing hot. Because it was summer, they let Jack and I sleep in the trailer because there's an air conditioner in there, and they slept in a tent. They're in there. They're like James's age. They're young, but they're not old. But they're in their early 70s. But they said no. And I kept saying, "Why don't you sleep in them? We'll sleep in the tent." They wouldn't. They just wouldn't let us. And so they slept in that tent, and we slept in air-conditioned comfort. And they watched over us, fed us. They made our 4 weeks in their company an amazing adventure. I was just thrilled for Jack. People go to Australia for vacations all the time, but typically they stay in a hotel and they go to the tourist places. But Jack saw Australia like an Australian. He was with Australians all the time, in their homes, in their caravans. And here you've got Ray, who's just had a lifetime of unbelievably amazing experiences. Just sharing them, he and Cheryl, just sharing those with us all those weeks. I just couldn't have imagined a better experience for Jack. they are to be praised for the sacrifice they made, and especially because they did not see it as a sacrifice, but as a blessing. They were glad to do it, and that meant a tremendous amount to me. Sometimes we laughed until we cried, literally. And sometimes we talked about Australia, and we talked about the church, about the need for the word to be spread there. We talked about serious things. There were moments we just shared in silence as we gazed upon the majesty of God's creation. But we spent the first 2 days after we left Bundaberg in Maryborough in the home of Daryl and Sylvia Griffith. The day that we got there, we took Daryl down to Harvey Bay, just about an hour away, and he had cataract surgery. So that's why he's got that big Band-Aid on his eye. But we got there on Monday, and on Tuesday, which is the day that they have their regular Bible study, we were there for that. The church meets in their home, and as I mentioned, Ray and or Evert and Joan, I'm sorry they're not in this picture, but they came up for that as well. And Ray and Cheryl and Jack and I were there. There's a couple on the left-hand side. I didn't think to write down their names, and I can't remember, but they were there. She's been a Christian for many years. Her husband is just a new convert. We spent about 4 hours on Tuesday morning and then afternoon studying together and talking about some questions that they had about different issues, and it was great. And Joan and Evert were very much appreciated, the fact that they were there. This is a congregation of 4, and so when you have a congregation of 4 with four visitors, it's great. And it was lovely. And while we were there, we were able to visit another brother who is dying of terminal liver cancer over in Harvey Bay. We were able to go and visit David and Tier Bennett, who live in Maryborough. They worship with the congregation that the Griffiths used to attend, but which they had issues with. And I'll say a bit more about that later when I make some final observations about the trip. But we stayed there until Wednesday morning, and then we drove to another city called Gympie, and I was able to speak on. Let me just show you this slide. This is the trailer or the caravan and the truck that we traveled with. This was Daryl and Sylvia's backyard. Daryl has mango trees, mostly, has a grove of those that he cares for. And so we left there on Wednesday. We traveled to Gympie, and I was invited to speak for a small group that meet in that city. What really impressed me about the brethren in Gympie was, after listening to me preach for an hour, and I went pretty long, a little past time for them to stop, no complaints. Not only did they not complain, they stayed for another hour, and we just kept talking about the things we'd been talking about in the class. That really impressed me. Their desire not to stop, but to continue studying for as long as they could. It was tremendously encouraging. The lesson that I shared with them was one that I've actually preached here before, compromising with the Word, and had much to do with the fact that we need to take our spiritual life seriously. After Ray heard that lesson, he said, you need to teach that lesson everywhere we go. So poor Ray and Cheryl and Jack heard that lesson again everywhere we went. Just about. Maybe everywhere.
Yeah.
Ray was quite insistent that I continue to teach that lesson everywhere we go, because there's been problems in Australia. It's just like there's problems here, just like there's problems everywhere with compromise and with getting caught up in things of this world. And so I taught that lesson that night. It was very well received. And again, we talked about it more after the Bible study time was over. I'm just going to show you this slide real quickly. Jack will know exactly what this slide means because it's a bakery. Ray is addicted to bakeries. He's a thin fella, but I've never known a man with more of a sweet tooth than Ray Ward. And it was hard to get him to go past the bake shop. He did pass most of them, but every once in a while, and you'll see it says pies there. It doesn't mean apple pie. it means meat pies, which we had for lunch many times. And their Aussie pies are a wonderful thing, which I miss. I was glad to find out while we were away, Michelle and the kids went to discovered there are 3 Aussie pie restaurants in Toronto, downtown. So if I ever need one badly, I don't have to go all the way back to Australia. I can get my fix downtown Toronto. But from Friday until Monday, we then went to Toowoomba. Years earlier, Rolly McDowell had expressed his hope that I could visit this congregation. And so I was very pleased to be able to fulfill his wish. Ray and Cheryl set the caravan up at a caravan park in the park. Jack and I helped them get that set up, and then this young couple, Daniel and Larissa McDonald, had Jack and I to come stay in their home. Larissa is the daughter of David and Tier Bennett, who we had visited in Maribor. They were wonderful hosts. We had a great time getting to know them. They took good care of us. Jack and I were very glad that for at least 3 nights now, Ray and Cheryl could enjoy the comfort of the air-conditioned caravan while we were gone. And while I was with the brethren in Maribor, I shared 3 lessons with them, with these fine brethren. On Sunday, had some excellent one-on-one Bible discussions as well. Brother Tony Holm, who is I forget what the relationship is now, but anyway, he's one of the senior members of the congregation there, expressed the desire of the brethren for me to come back and present more lessons. One day wasn't enough. They hope when I come back I can come for a mission while I'm there, and I truly hope that such will be possible in the future. This was the largest congregation that I met with on this trip. I'm guessing there were about 80 to 90 members there. It was a congregation quite like ours, not so much in size, but in diversity. It was a very multicultural congregation. There was a brother there from the Philippines. There were brethren there from Africa and other countries as well. And after service, we went to a park nearby, had a really nice potluck, and was able to get to know some of the people a little better. And then Monday, our kind host took us out for breakfast, brought us back over to Ray and Cheryl's. Excuse those white legs there. Ray and Cheryl's. It was blinding for some people, but brought us back over to the caravan. We spent Monday night with them back at the caravan again. And unbeknownst to me, Ray was also able to set up a study on Monday night in another home that met in another congregation that met in a couple's home. Karen Martin and his wife, we met in their home and studied for about an hour and a half, and then once again probably talked just about that much longer afterwards. This is a congregation that split off of the group that I was with in Toowoomba. I don't really know what the issues were, but they had a split, and I was glad I was able to speak to both congregations, and I hope that some of the things I said might be able to help them in the future with the division that's taking place. But Tuesday morning, there we are, the 4 of us together. We loaded up the truck and we headed to the Sunshine Coast and to the small city of Mooloolaba, where we stayed for the next 7 days. The caravan park we stayed in was right beside the Coral Sea. It was beautiful. There was all kinds of scrub turkeys running around everywhere. Plenty of lizards for Jack to catch. The ocean was right there, and Jack even saw some possums one night, Australian possums, which are cute little things that I've not seen yet. So he's one up on me. But while we were there, Jack and I were able to spend 2 days at Australia Zoo. It's lovely. And of course, because Jack is Jack caught 2 water dragons, nice ones. And Jack caught a bunch of skinks. And at the end of the first day, I saw this sign. We would hate for you to be asked to leave. Please, notice what it says, please don't touch the water dragons. Well, Jack didn't touch them, he caught them. And it just so happened when I saw this sign, I turned around and Jack's holding one. And then I see the sign that says, you are being videotaped, because it was in a little kiddie park. I said, Jack, put it down. And don't catch any more. That's it. No more at the park. So we had 2 great days there. We spent one night in the home of David and Debbie Reed. They live in a little town called Sippy Downs, and the congregation that they worship with also meets in their home. Yes? Slippy Downs, yeah. Cute little names they have there. Lulaba and Toowoomba and Slippy Downs. And had a great time with them. They had us over for dinner. We had a great discussion. And then Sunday, I presented 4 lessons. 2 for the congregation that meet in Moray Field, and then that evening for the brethren in Rochdale. And this is Jack and I with Tim and Leonie Young. Leonie is the daughter of Rolly McDowell. Rolly McDowell was, again, the preacher in Bundaberg, one of my favorite people ever, Rolly and Nancy. This is their daughter and their son-in-law, Tim. I hadn't seen them since 2003. In 2003, they came and stayed with us in Florida for about a week. It was wonderful. And then in that following September, I was back in Australia and spent the last, I think, 3 days with them in their home in Rochdale, which again is a suburb of Brisbane. So it was, and this was the day when it was 43 degrees. And in the morning, the congregation was air conditioned, but in the evening, it wasn't. And there was a fan on me, but I really thought several times I was going to faint. It was so hot, it's like 109 degrees. But I was able to not faint, and everything went really well. And it was great to be with the brethren in Rochdale, in Morayfield, in Toowoomba, and in Gympie, and Maryborough. But then it was time for us to move on. We went back to Bundaberg on Monday. We stayed in Bundaberg until Thursday morning. Just a couple days. I was able to continue teaching on Wednesday night. I was going through the stepping up to the plate lessons there, and we talked about that again on Wednesday night. Thursday morning, we're on the road again. We're heading now for Rockhampton, and as they call it, Rocky. Bundaberg is Bundy, Rockhampton is Rocky. Everything is nicknamed there. We're heading for Rocky, and we first stayed in the home of Jeff and Linda Johnson, who you see pictured here. Years ago when I was first there, Linda was married, I forget her husband's name now, but he was also a Johnson, the cousin of her current husband. When I was there, he had cancer. Several years later, he passed away from cancer. Jeff's wife passed away, and they hadn't really actually known each other. They just met by coincidence a few years after their spouses had died, met each other, fell in love, got married. He has a large cattle, they don't call it a farm, we call it a farm, cattle station in Rockhampton, and then he has a much larger one, hours further into the west. And I think he has over 5,000 head of cattle that he raises. And so we spent, we had lunch with them when we got to Rockhampton. Then we went to their beach house in Zilsey, which is about an hour away. We stayed in Zilsey for 3 days. But the next morning, after we spent the first night in Zilsey, he was going to be branding the cattle. And it was deemed good for Jack and I to see this. So not only did we see it, but I'm holding the tail of this poor little beast, and you can see the smoke coming off of his hindquarters there as Jeff was branding them. And it was quite interesting. I am really glad it's not my calling. I think just watching them would be fine, but branding them, and then they have to take a big chunk out of their ear. They clip their ears, and hearing those poor things cry, they get over it real quick. But it was interesting to watch it, and I was glad to see it. And glad to be there, and I was able to, after 3 days in Zilsey, Sunday, speak for the congregation that meets in Zilsey. Now let me just show you this picture before I get there. This is Jack and Ray, as you can probably tell. And Ray is having a crocodile pie, and Jack is having a crocodile burger. And I also was eating the crocodile pie. We were at a crocodile farm, which was really interesting. Spent the morning there. And crocodile is quite tasty. This slide is, on the top are kangaroo sausages. The 2 uncooked portions of meat are beef. And then the 2 red strips are kangaroo skewers. Kangaroo meat is delicious. They are cute and cuddly, kinda. But they taste better than they look. Not really, but they're quite good. And so I decided to share that with you. We did get to eat some of the local cuisine. This was the congregation that meets in Zilsey. And it's just a small group. They meet in a home there as well, in the home of Gordon and Glenda Johnson. I was very glad to be able to present a few lessons there. Sunday evening, we were back up. We're an hour west in Rockhampton, where I was able to speak as well, present 2 lessons there. It was the first time I'd been back to that congregation since 2003. I'd spoken there 14 years earlier. It's an interesting congregation. When I was there 14 years ago, it was King James only that they used, but now they also are allowing folks to in the service to use the New King James Version, which I have no problem with that. Keeps everybody on the same page, and was very glad to be able to present lessons for both these congregations. Once again, there are 2 congregations because there's been a split, and I didn't I didn't dig into what was behind the split, but there was a split, and it's between some brothers, literally brothers in the flesh, Johnson brothers. Something happened, and though God hates division, they are still brothers. They still are able to worship together. Some of these folks came to Rockhampton that night to hear me, and the joy that I get out of this is that there's a congregation in Zilsey now as well, where there wasn't one before, a faithful group that meet in that city, and so I was very glad for that. Monday evening, we went back to the cattle station. We spent the night there with Jeff and Linda again. We're just thrilled. We got a phone call from Rick and Cheryl Lee. That little baby that I showed you at the beginning, Alicia, was baptized while we were there. Her dad, Rick, baptized her, so that was really wonderful, wonderful news. It was great to see the joy in Ray and Cheryl's eyes as they learned that their granddaughter had put on Christ. Tuesday, we headed down about an hour or so, hour and a half south, back down to Gladstone, the home of Carol Zacino. And this is one of the families from Rockhampton. I forgot to mention that. Sorry. And then we went to the home of Carol Zacino. Carol's husband is a fine fellow. He's not a Christian. So for the past 5 years, Carol has been really fortunate. She's had a couple, husband and wife, Jamie and Deborah Williams, worshiping with her. He's been there working for 5 years and living in Gladstone. And they now have 3 children. And they're the daughter and son-in-law of Ron Holbrook. Some of you know Ron. It's Ron's daughter and her husband have been there for 5 years, but they're going home in April. So Carol will once again be, as she has so often been in the past, alone. She is the only Christian that she's aware of, other than this couple that have been there in Gladstone, in that city. It was a joy to teach the lesson at the Williams home that night, and what was really cool was that we had Bong and Emmanuel Takbad. They were there on Skype. I quickly discovered that they are the cousins of Mel Takbad, whose wife is Den's sister, Den and Abraham's sister. The connections are just unbelievable. So, but these 2 guys often Skype in for the Bible study, which is really encouraging especially for Carol, as when she's by herself, she'll have a couple guys that she can study with, and I'll contact her. I can study with her too, and it was just great to study with them, to spend that time together that night, to spend time with Carol and be an encouragement to her. But unfortunately, we could only stay for a day and a night, and then just briefly in the morning. Then we headed back to Bundaberg for the last few days that we would have there. Once again, it was my joy to teach the midweek class, and then again on Sunday to to be able to preach for the congregation. And Thursday night, by invitation of a small group, I was invited to teach a class at the Take the Plunge Cafe in downtown Bundaberg. It's a coffee shop run by a member of the church and her sister. It's one of these coffee shops where you can buy your coffee and contribute a little bit of money if you want. And that money that's raised is used to give people that are in need coffee, food. Just a really nice idea. Had a great Bible study there that night. This was the group that we met with. This is a young lady that's a Christian, and her sister and her sister's husband and another young lady were there. We had a great study that night. This was my last Sunday, our last Sunday there, with the dear sisters and brothers in Bundaberg. And this was at Rick and Shirley's home. After service, a few hours later, they had a farewell tea for us. And there was Joan and Evert again. And it was lovely. And it was as Cindy, Benjamin and her husband, her boys. It's always a joy to come and hard to leave, but leave we had to do. We had a few days there, bade our farewells to the brethren, to Rick and Shirley, Blake and Alicia, thanked them for all the kindness that they showed us. And then we headed back down to Brisbane, and we went to the Great Australian Outback Show. And we all got free hats. And I still have mine at the house. And it had been hoped that there would be an opportunity to preach for one last time, to teach in a congregation in Brisbane. But there was one congregation that we contacted that did not want me to come. Clearly they didn't want me to come because they never would respond. And I believe the members there were invited to hear me when I was speaking at Rochdale Sunday night, but they had an emergency meeting at that congregation that night. And one of the members there is a friend, and she told me they'd never had an emergency meeting before, but when they were invited to come hear me, they had an emergency meeting, so they couldn't come. So for whatever reason, I hope someday that I can visit them and study with them. But just a few final observations as we gaze at Jack looking out over the, what are those mountains called? The Glass House Mountains off in the distance there. The church in Australia is struggling, just like it is here, like it is in many places. But it's far from dead. There are some fine young people in the congregations, just as we have fine young people here. And they give me hope for the future of the church there. A few congregations that I visited have had splits fairly recently. I hope and pray that these brethren will be able to carefully and prayerfully discuss what divided them and come back together if possible, and if not, at least be able as brethren to put the past behind them and to carry on and to be strong in the faith. I was told repeatedly while I was there, everywhere I went, I was constantly asked to come back and told how much they appreciated us being there, how encouraging it was for us to be there. And what they really wanted was for me to bring Michelle. Everywhere. Bring your wife. Bring your wife. So I hope next time I go that I'll be able to do that and try and find a way to be able to bring her. I pray, as you look at me looking out over the Glasshouse Mountains, I just pray for Australia, for the good brethren there, that the church will grow, that the church will thrive. I thank you, brothers and sisters, for allowing me to be gone for those 6 weeks. I'm especially grateful to James and to Dan and to James Sullivan and to my dad. Did I leave anybody out? These are men that came here. Steve, it's right in the front row. Steve came over, and you guys filled in for me while I was away. Jeremy Disselkamp came 5 of the 6 Tuesday nights that I was gone and taught class for me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. it's really encouraging to be able to be with those brethren. And then it's really wonderful to come home, because as great as it is to be there, it's even better to come back. And then you get missing them, and it's great to go back, and so on and so on. And the I think the biggest, not the biggest thrill, but one of the biggest thrills, that the young lady Alicia being baptized was the biggest thrill. But the second biggest thrill was when I found out that Menchie's family were here. Something about me going to Australia opens the door for Filipinos to be able to come to Canada. When I was there in 2015, Rose's family came. I waited 8 years to be at the airport so I could be there when they got here, and I was denied. I waited 7 years so I could be at the airport to meet Menchie's family, and once again I was denied. And it's all Australia's fault. Me being at the airport doesn't mean a thing. The fact that they're here is what matters. And we thank God for that. We give glory to God for watching over all of them, all those years that they were apart from one another. Isn't it awesome that they are all here now, all healthy? Nobody died in those years that they were away. Nobody got sick and ill and wasn't able to come. They're all here. We thank God for that. Let's take our hymn books and turn to hymn number 297.